10 Things I Hate About You. The film 10 Things I Hate About You was released in 1999 and gave us a somewhat accurate depiction of a classic American high school experience. We follow the storylines of a few main characters who come from very different backgrounds and go through the film facing challenges and reacting in very different ways. A story that ties in everything from high school hatred, a social pyramid, an alive and well male patriarchal system, and love. This film covers more bases than what may originally meet the eye. Let's break down some components that can be seen upon deeper analysis. The first observable theme I'd like to take a look at is gender politics, sexism, and misogyny. Though this movie is almost an entire example of an issue within this theme, there are some prime and unignorable examples we can see throughout. A teacher referring to the main character with a quote saying, "Yes, miss, I have an opinion about everything," in response to her raising her hand to ask a question. In addition to this constant commentary, we can see throughout the movie the constant negotiation between male characters when they want to get something from girls. For example, the main character, who is male, getting paid to date the female lead character for the benefit of a buyer in this elaborate scheme that takes place. The second theme I chose to look at was stereotypes. One major stereotype we can see that is a classic of early 2000s set movies is the school lunchroom and social segregation of the school itself and places such as common areas. The directors made it obvious which characters are a part of which social circles, which are termed geeks or nerds, weird kids they don't wish to associate with, party kids, and others. My third observable theme I chose to look at was the underlying term of white supremacy within the film. We can see how one of the main teachers throws in a brief comment about how the school's literacy system can't seem to buy a book not written by a middle-aged white male, while the class is discussing a Hemingway story. We can also notice he's one of the only two non-white characters within the entire film. Considering the film takes place in Tacoma, Washington, one of the most diverse cities in the state, I still find it hard to believe that this portrayal isn't entirely accurate for this time period. As far as selective exposure goes, for my side of watching the film, though I could see it extremely difficult not to notice or pick up these themes and issues present within this media piece, I will say that someone whose social position that's different from mine would potentially view this through a different lens. For example, I'm a young woman in college, and someone who per se is an elderly man not necessarily in college or who was raised this way would not necessarily see or recognize an issue with the various aspects of the film I've already discussed. And this isn't entirely his fault either, but rather due to his environment, upbringing, and exposure relative to when he was growing up that would later lead to this. This is why exposure to different ways of analysis are extremely important. As far as relation from the film and our current political climate, we can see within the film that the most common and probably the most relatable parts of the movie that can be seen in our world and society today are the way that women in this piece, even at a high school age, are treated. Some may feel the movie exaggerates certain instances, but in reality, as someone who's witnessed and experienced these things in real life, I'd have to disagree. What's even more so worse is how the adults in this piece, for example, her father, the teachers, her coach, etc., allow certain things to go on and almost somewhat agree with the commentary that goes on. To think that any of the things that occur in this movie were socially acceptable, even if it was 20 years ago, is somewhat mind-blowing. The contemporary media effect theories that are present in the film, I chose two, and the first is the cultivation effect. For this time period, projecting a high school experience similar to this one to millions of impressionable teenagers could possibly influence them to act or feel more likely to reform to these certain groups within their school, or the opposite, depending on which character you sympathize with within the film. My second theory is the spiral of silence. And in a similar realm to the bandwagon effect, this can be seen present in 10 Things I Hate About You. Though many characters, especially many of the female characters, may subtly agree that the morals of characters like Joey are wrong and annoying, there's only a few people who seem to be okay and open with challenging these ways of thinking, due to the fact that it's extremely difficult to stand up and make a choice that's beneficial when it causes you to go against the grain and against others. An additional aspect I decided to focus on was the film's ties with relation to Shakespeare. There's many Shakespearean references and metaphors within the film, which in my opinion can tell us a few things. The first being that it can serve as a metaphor in the film for how similar the two time periods may actually be. Between the social classes, acceptable sexism, and ways characters interact in power, they might not be so different. Shakespearean ties are also heavily important in this case due to a key piece of the entire film, Kat's final monologue. The poem itself, modeled after Shakespearean writing, including iambic pentameter, not to mention the film's plot, based on an entire Shakespeare play, The Taming of the Shrew, is a great example of how the media never stops using other media. As far as other application goes, the media holds a lot of power whether we realize it or not. This was somewhat of a wake-up call for me. The influence it can have can be seen in a variety of ways and outcomes. I enjoy being able to now look more in depth and be able to be much more critical when I analyze media pieces after learning more about the details of our media world. In conclusion, it's almost respectable that a director can take so many social issues and everyday problems we know so well as romanticize them with a teenage coming-of-age film. You may never realize the depths of what you're specifically and truly watching unless you're really looking for it. And now, I'll never be able to watch this piece and classic the same way as before.